Hi Year 12. We're going to begin this lesson with a retrieval practice. So if you could pause the video and write down your answers to the 5 questions on the screen for me, please. Off you go. Okay, so if you have completed this, I'll now go through the answers so that you can tick or fix anything you need to. Number 1, name 3 literary critical theories. So we have studied feminism, structuralism, New Historicism. You might have also started post-colonialism with Mrs. Hodgkinson as well. Number 2, her marriage to Léonce Pontellier was purely an accident, in this respect resembling many other marriages which masquerade as the decrees of fate. I'd like you to recall one symbol of entrapment within the text. So there's several that we could have done here. We might have talked about the bird, the parrot in the cage at the start of the text. We might have talked about Léonce holding the ring and then passing it to her. 4, recall the method that Chopin uses to show natural love versus love to meet societal expectations. So she uses the image of light. Artificial light demonstrates that artificial happiness that society portray. Natural light demonstrates natural love. Question 5. Why was this hailed as a landmark work of early feminism in the 60s? So we've looked before at how feminism happened in various different waves. And in the 60s, theorists worked to recover texts that were written and perhaps forgotten earlier, and this is one of those texts that was rediscovered in the 60s, and it was called a landmark work of early feminism because it was the first text that really recognised female desire. Okay, so in this lesson we're actually just going to cover up to chapter 17, but I would like you to complete this low stakes quiz just so that you can recap on what you've read in preparation for this lesson. So chapter 16, what makes Edna jealous when she visits Robert's mum, and what would Edna not sacrifice for herself? Chapter 17, what is Edna expected to do on a Tuesday, and what does Edna try to do when she is left at home alone? In chapter 19, what does Edna feel like doing? She says, I feel like. What does she feel like doing? And in chapter 20, why does Edna visit Mademoiselle Reisz? Answer those questions for me, please. Off you go. Okay then, so we're going to look at chapters 16 and 17 in more detail. So in chapter 15, Edna receives the news that Robert is leaving Grand Isle and that he is going to Mexico. And obviously she's affected by this. Society believe that she will be superficially upset, but it's really just a matter of fact, and she still has her husband and children, so she'll be fine. However, for Edna, this is a devastating blow to hear that Robert's leaving her on Grand Isle, and the one person she has a true and natural connection with is leaving to go somewhere else. And on receiving that news, Chopin describes how Edna bit her handkerchief convulsively, striving to hold back and hide, even from herself as she would have hidden from another, the emotion which was troubling, tearing her. Her eyes were brimming with tears. This quotation reveals a lot about Edna's state of mind and her current position within society. She hasn't yet fully succumbed to that natural impulse within her, and she's still trying to mask and hide her true emotions in society. What I would like you to do is copy down this quotation and see if you can explain, using annotations, why the words that I've highlighted in red are particularly important. Okay, off you go. Let's have a closer look at this quotation then. So, Edna bit her handkerchief convulsively. The adverb convulsively there is used to indicate Edna's anger and her strife to control the uncontrollable. So if a person's having a convulsion, it's like a fit. She's overcome with a fit of emotion and she can't really do anything. Now she bites down on her handkerchief. you might have seen in cartoons and comedies when they give people a wooden spoon to put in their mouth to mask pain. That's kind of what's happening here. She's biting down on her handkerchief to release some of that anger. It's a really primal move because these emotions that she feels are raw and primitive emotions. A handkerchief is interesting as a symbol as well, because people often use handkerchiefs to wipe away tears, etc. And that's symbolic of how she's trying to hide and wipe away those external signs of her emotion. In purple, I've highlighted hold back and hide, which demonstrates that restraint and the repression of her true emotions that's expected from society. And at this point, she tries to hide it from herself as she would have hidden it from another. The emotion is troubling, tearing her. So those verbs there are contradictory. Chopin uses this to represent Edna's conflicted state as she struggles between the emotions that she feels at Robert's leaving and how she is expected to react. Tearing as well is interesting because tearing demonstrates something being torn into two, and it's like Robert's leaving her. It feels like a part of her has been torn away as well. And her eyes are brimming with tears. Brimming means the tears are forming, but they're not yet falling, which shows that she's not allowing herself to react in the way that she truly feels. So again, we have this conflict between head and heart. She's feeling a real raw emotion at the loss of Robert, with him going away, but she's trying to mask and hide that emotion because it's not appropriate to demonstrate it in society. And I think Chopin's showing us here how quite often society will attempt to control even our emotional reaction to things. So then, after Robert leaves, Edna continues with her life on Grand Isle. It's described how Robert's going had some way taken the brightness, the colour, the meaning out of everything. Now we've looked in the past at what light demonstrates, so brightness would be an interesting word there. But we also looked last lesson at the metaphor of colour and how her new eyes allowed her to see colour in everything. However, Robert's going away has taken the brightness and the colour. So literally, what does this mean? And then metaphorically, what does this demonstrate? If colour carries connotations of variation, excitement, possibility, what does the colour leaving from her life demonstrate? What is she left with after Robert goes? She has to kind of go back to her normal life. So I'd like you to perform, as we practiced in the past, a literal and a metaphorical interpretation of this quotation for me, please. Off you go. Okay, so in chapter 16, following the departure of Robert's now gone to Mexico, Adele, Ratignolle and Edna have a conversation. And Edna tells Madame Ratignolle that she would give up I would give up my, for my children, but I wouldn't give. I would like you to place the following words into that quotation for me, please, and copy and complete the quotation using the words in blue. Off you go. Now, I think it's interesting that here Chopin separates myself with life. And I think that demonstrates how a person's spirit is so much more than a physical thing. So Edna says that she will not sacrifice herself for her children. And Madame Ratignolle's reaction to this is quite interesting. She says, "I don't know what you would call the unessential or what you mean by the unessential," said Madame Ratignolle cheerfully. "But a woman who would give her life for her children could do no more than that. Your Bible tells you so. I'm sure I couldn't do more than that." "Oh, yes, you could," laughed Edna. Now, this interaction between the two of them demonstrates how Edna being awakened to her true nature and seeing the flaws in society around her is almost at an advantage to Madame Ratignolle, because she can see that truth and she can see that actually a person shouldn't have to sacrifice themselves in order to perform that role of mother woman. We then see how entrapped within this system Madame Ratignolle is. I think as well, where it says, "Your Bible tells you so," is further evidence that Chopin believes that religion is used as a further source of oppression within the text. So Edna is very much awakened and realises the truth about life, whereas Madame Ratignolle is very much, as Edna's literary foil, still entrapped within that system. So Grand Isle then is a source of freedom for Edna. She can spend her time with, or she could spend her time with Robert while she was there. And that's where her emotional awakening happened, in the ocean there. She learnt to swim and became awakened. However, the time on Grand Isle was limited and they now return to New Orleans, sorry. So on their return to New Orleans, we have a description of their house. Their home is very well kept and a demonstration of their wealth, social status, and outward display of perfection. Chopin describes at length the outward appearance of the house. She describes the front yard of the house and how everything to the outside eye is completely perfect. Inside, she describes lots of things that convey the wealth of the family. And we learn that Edna has a certain routine, a dictated routine, to follow while she's at home in New Orleans. Certain nights they go out to dinner, on certain nights they go to the opera, and her whole life is very carefully controlled by the structure. On a Tuesday, Edna is supposed to receive visitors, but on this particular Tuesday, she decided to go out instead. Now, this description of how of what they're supposed to do on which night and how strict and set it is symbolic of how New Orleans for Edna represents entrapment, in contrast to Grand Isle, where she didn't have any of these strict schedules and responsibilities to follow. In New Orleans, she's expected to do as she's told, basically, and follow a set routine. However, we learn that Edna decided to disrupt that routine, and Mr. Pontellier is furious about that. So the visitors on a Tuesday are supposed to be the wives of Mr. Pontellier's wealthy friends in society. And we learn that this whole routine is all about keeping up appearances. Mr. Pontellier's reaction to Edna deciding not to do her Tuesday visiting is, he says, "Well, my dear, I should think you'd understand by this time that people don't do such things. We've got to observe les convenances if we're ever to expect to get on and keep up with the procession. If you feel that you have to leave home this afternoon, you should have left some suitable explanation for your absence." Several interesting things here. People don't do such things. So what Edna's done is just assert a bit of independence and do something that she would rather do because she didn't want to do her visits. But people don't do such things. That collective noun there, people, demonstrates how it's a societal expectation that she's expected to uphold just for the sake of upholding it, really. I think particularly important here is how he says that we need to keep up with the procession. So a procession is a line of people, generally in a parade or something similar. And Mr. Pontellier wants them to just be part of that procession, part of that big crowd, and appear the same as everyone else. And that's what's most important to Mr. Pontellier, keeping up those appearances and appearing to be like everyone else, which we learn is unimportant to Edna. So in a question about societal expectations, this quotation would be particularly important. Keep up with the procession. So I'm going to test you on your retrieval of that quotation next lesson. One of my favourite parts in the novel in terms of the symbolic meaning occurs on page 82 in chapter 17. Edna is left alone and she tries to destroy her wedding ring. So she's overcome with this anger. And that's symbolic of her need to break free from something. Chopin describes how she flung it upon the carpet. When she saw it lying there, she stamped her heel upon it, striving to crush it. But her small boot heel did not make an indenture, not a mark upon the little glittering circlet. So this is a really significant quotation, and this is one of those ones that I've read in most essays about the awakening because it can kind of be used to fit all ideas about the awakening. So on a literal level, Edna just tries to break her wedding ring because she's angry. Metaphorically, the ring symbolises entrapment because it's that complete circle. It's supposed to symbolise eternal love and connection. We know it doesn't symbolise that for Edna and Leonce, but instead is a symbol of her entrapment. Symbolically, the fact that she can't damage the ring in any way demonstrates how she can't break free of society. Her small boot heel, that noun phrase there, small boot heel, is symbolic of her powerlessness. And she can't make an indenture, not a mark upon the little glittering circlet. So despite her striving to crush it, there's nothing she can do because society's expectations of marriage are so strong. Okay, we'll pick up next lesson with this quotation again and we'll perform a literal, metaphorical and symbolic reading of this. Okay, well done guys. Remember to submit your work if you can through email or through Show My Homework.